Okay, guys, thanks for coming out. It's so great to see you guys. I'd like to mention at the beginning that this program is funded by the Oregon Cultural Foundation and the writers.
Yeah.
Okay, the writers for this project are Lorna Cagle, who's not here, Nancy Fine, Lisa Wolf, and Peg Wallace. We have a guest star doing musical interludes, Tom Wallace. So each of these writers wrote about their specific tooth fairy. So Lorna wrote Ava, and Nancy wrote Mira, Peg wrote Duncan and Maisie, and Lisa wrote Buck. So how it's going to go is our fabulous writers, they're going to be doing their readings, and then we're going to have a snack break, and then they're going to do the rest of the readings, and after there will be a panel discussion if you have any questions for the authors. So following this, books will be available for purchase and signing. So let's get started. Thank you. Go girl.
Well, we're here to have some fun, and as we prepared, it was like, I was telling my son, I said, "Now, please pray for us, we're doing this morning." He says, "Remember, this is fun." So we're here to have fun, so I encourage you guys to think about ways to have fun while we're doing this. We'll be reading from the Tooth Fairy Storybook, and as Beryl mentioned, there'll be 4 stories. Lisa will be reading Ava's story since Lorna has moved to Washington. We still Zoom with her and visit, but she won't be here making her presentation. So you get to have the inside story on these tiny little creatures and the things they could encounter on a tooth fairy trail trying to pick up someone's tooth and leave some money. So you'll get a behind the scenes view and see and hear some of their tricky tooth fairy business. So as Beryl mentioned, we'll do readings, a snack, and at the end of that first break we'll have some coloring pages for anyone of all ages that would like to color on the characters, and a short panel, and then there will be books for sale and signing if you wish. So at this point, I will introduce Peg Wallace and Duncan.
Sure you want to stay?
Good morning. Welcome to Tooth Fairy Central. Children's teeth were considered good luck charms in ancient Norse culture. The warriors purchased a tooth from a child and wore the tooth into battle. This belief grew into the Tooth Fairy, a popular children's icon. But who are the Tooth Fairies, and what do they look like? And what do they do when they're not collecting teeth? Come, join in and join the fun as these tales unfold. Good morning. Tooth Fairy Duncan, Stalwart, by M.J. Wells, myself. Duncan grabbed a slurp of coffee from his mug and leaned forward in the squeaky office chair to inspect the console display screens. Nothing. He loosed a long-suffering sigh. "All quiet, Maisie, old gal," he said, and reached down to stroke her furry head. "Surely by now there'd be a return shuttle coming in or something, wouldn't you think?" The white rat opened milky blind eyes and turned to nuzzle her master's hand. She too heaved a sigh and curled up in the wicker basket beside the desk. Duncan surveyed the dispatch office's cramped quarters. His gaze settled on his dusty leather dispatch bag. He'd used it to prop the door open. A pang of longing shot through his heart. Would they ever go out on assignment again? He shrugged off the glum and plopped his feet on the edge of Maisie's basket. Outside the door, a calm spring breeze drifted through the open bay door of Tooth Fairy Central's helideck landing pad. So quiet for this early in the morning. "Ah, I have been grounded so long I've nearly forgotten the feel of wind in my wings. All I did was a bit of pranking. 'Twas a wee bitty knot I tied at the ends of that magnificent mustache of his." Maisie trilled a white rat chuckle from her basket. "Aye, the look on his face was worth it. Well, till the fight broke out. How was I to know the whole biker gang was in the middle of negotiating disputes?" Maisie's little pink paw waved in sign language. "You're right, that's probably where Mr. Harley Dude lost a tooth. We wouldn't have been there but for him putting it under his pillow to begin with. And lots more pearly whites got knocked out in their little Donnybrook. But did any of 'em think to plop a tooth or two under a pillow? Maisie sneezed from her basket and shook her head. Not a one. No way to make amends. Oh, well, no counting for squabblers, Duncan snorted, nor their nasty tempers. He tapped the white rat on the shoulder and reached his round nose to touch her little pink one. We'll get out there again, old girl. Don't you worry. He sank back into his chair. Maisie curled up in her basket. Both rat and fairy heaved a heavy sigh as tedium, dull as dried-up pixie dust, settled around them. Question: are Duncan and Maisie destined to become piles of desiccated pixie dust? Stay tuned to find out.
Tooth Fairy book, Doggedness, by Lisa Wolfe, me. Old Robin scratched idly at the stubble of a 3-day beard. The itch didn't go away. Rubbing his cheek, little lobs of sweat, dust, and grease piled up under his fingertips. Maybe it had been more than 3 days since his last wash. He couldn't remember. He rubbed harder till the crud began falling away in clumps. He wiped his filthy fingers on equally filthy pants with a sigh. Ah, and here came what he was waiting for. It looked like a heat wrinkle at first, then maybe a cloud, but there were no clouds on a frying hot day like this. Whatever, it wouldn't be seen by anyone who mattered. Old Robbins reached for his collecting bag as the wrinkle swung in, hovered over the roof, and lowered. A blink, and it morphed into the silver ship he knew so well. Its hatch slid open, steps unfolded toward the rooftop, and there at the top of them stood his replacement. Oh, no! The words escaped Robin's mouth in a half-strangled whisper. You can't be serious. From the top of the steps, a young tooth fairy stretched himself tall as if he were king surveying his newly won kingdom. Cool, he exclaimed. Totally awesome. Yeah. His voice faded into wonder at the vastness of it. Totally. He bounced down the stairs and unfurled his wings to take a flying hop over the last 5 steps. I'd keep those things tucked if I was you, Robbins grumbled, gathering himself off his perch. Young tooth fairy like you makes a fine target for any number of troubles. Don't need to be complicating things by flying your colors. Robbins ran his eyes up and down the figure in front of him. Shiny new Stetson, tooled and embroidered leather vest, silver belt buckle glinting in the sun, creased jeans tucked into polished cowboy boots, and hand-embroidered name on his collecting bag. Robin stifled a groan. At least the kid wasn't decked out in chaps. And he did have a rope curled over his shoulder. That was good. He would need the rope. What do you call yourself, son? The tooth fairy stuck out his hand and announced in a well-practiced drawl, Howdy, I'm Buck. Buck, huh? Robbins took the soft hand in his calloused own, giving it a perfunctory shake. Well, he held the etchings of his face in the most positive layout he could muster. No need to make it harder for the lad. Best of luck to you. Robbins eased himself up the steps to the ship's hatch. He turned, gave the young tooth fairy a cursory wave, and stepped into the ship. Dropping his bag, he took the privileged seat next to the pilot as the other fairies greeted him and stepped aside in respect. What was Admin thinking? His voice held a tinge of bitterness as he turned to the pilot. That kid's got no brains at all. Doesn't need brains. The pilot deftly guided the ship away from the rooftop. He's got daring. The pilot was old, ancient even. He'd seen it all. Daring, Robin's hand reached up to work his beard. Daring will just about get him killed. The pilot glanced at Robbins and grinned. Maybe you are forgetting. He let the sentence hang. Daring will keep him going till he learns the brains part. Hop toads and slippery snakes, Robin mumbled as he stared out the window. Mile-high cliffs cut mountain edges of a harsh and desiccated land. Hop toads and slippery snakes. What next? With a wrinkle in the atmosphere, the transport ship was gone. Jonathan Henry Atwood was Buck's real name. But no one would know it out here unless he told them, and he sure wasn't telling. He was Buck now for sure. And he settled his hat low over his brow in real cowboy fashion. The late spring breeze rattled cottonwood leaves on trees across the dusty street, a tiny building sheltered in their shade. That's the school. Buck turned as if reading a map and scanned the scene. Another small building stood up the street, also tucked under the grace of trees. And that's the hotel. His eyes scanned further. A flat expanse, glowing green in the midday sun, stretched eastward. From its far edge, a long sloping rise climbed forever toward the horizon. And that's the mountain. Buck grinned in satisfaction. And he had studied the textbooks well. He threw his arms in the air, and it's mine, he said, all mine. When Buck caught his breath again, he found himself not on Green Mountain slopes, but on the black tar paper roof of a rickety old building in a 5-building town. A wave of dust blew along the street. Buck lifted a foot. The tar stuck. Sure is hot out here. He spoke to a wind that carried sweat away before it could even dampen his brow. It wouldn't be long before the sweat won and dripped down his front, his back, his brow, and everywhere else if he didn't get out in the sun. Shade aplenty lay across the quiet street. One glance was enough to tickle Buck's fancy. An afternoon in the cottonwoods and no one to pester him with lectures, homework, or exams. Didn't that sound just about perfect? He unfurled his wings and caught a gust. Wow, that was fast. If he had listened to old Robbins, he would have had to slip down off the roof in a giant hop and scamper across the street. But no traffic moved for miles. In fact, nothing moved for miles. Old Robbins was a crank if he thought there was any reason to keep wings packed up out here. Buck sailed into the low branches next to the school building. Ah, a long sigh of contentment escaped him as he folded his wings and settled into the perfect crook of a branch. Not bad. Buck struggled awake from dreams of icebergs and strawberry slushies. His head itched. He struggled to sit his groggy self up. The sun had broken through the branches to heat his perch. Hot wasn't the word for it. It was sizzling. Dust swirled up his nose as Buck rubbed his eyes and proceeded to scratch his head. It itched. No, it didn't itch. He grabbed his hat off. His head was positively tingling. 2 low bumps were rising on each side of the top of his skull, with a sharp and almost audible pop. Nubbins broke through the surface. Buck grabbed at them. Antennas! He had antennas! He grasped at them in wonder as they rose steadily from the top of his head. Finally, he had his very own antennas, and they were wiggling. Question. Uh-oh, what does this mean?
Thank you, Tom. I'm Nancy Fine, and I'll be reading about Tooth Fairy Myra. Hello, kind hearts and gentle people. It's Myra reporting on my latest Tooth Fairy trail. And you get to hear the story straight from the fairy. Are you ready? Do you have your teeth brushed?
Yeah.
Yeah? Your chores done?
Yes.
Yeah? Your thank yous said and written? Yeah? Fantastic. Okay then, here we go. This assignment, which I will forever refer to as the milk cow mishap, was in the sage, juniper, and pokey lava country on the edge of a once small, now too big town. The family who lived there joked, "We haven't moved, but now we're 2 miles closer to town." Despite the growth all around them, they managed to keep things kind of old-timey. Farm animals, aluminum pipe hand lines for watering pasture, and such. That's a nice setup for sure. But you start mixing barns, critters, and other things that live in them, plus fairies, and well, let's just say things can get complicated in the swish of a tail. Read on, and I'll tell you about that. I had just finished my quarter swap and exchange flight. We'll come back to that later. Anyway, the sun wasn't up just yet, so I was flying low to stay out of the barn's light. I had a shelf picked out as my landing spot. It was on the stall wall where the egg money jar lives. While making my approach, I noticed Milk Cow in the stall. She was minding her own business, chewing her cud, and probably making milk in those special innards of hers. At the perfectly wrong moment, she flicked her tail, whap! Her tail clipped my wings and knocked me clear off my flight plan. The next thing I know, I'm not flying or landing where I'd planned. No siree, I am stuccoed, that means stuck, to a board near the shelf. And here is one of our drawings that Miss Lisa has done for us, and you will get to color one of those later. I radioed. I needed some help, so I activated my antenna connection and radioed dispatch. I was very careful explaining my location, but somehow the conversation got curdled. That's brown talk, barn talk for went sour. I said I'm on the east side of town, I repeated myself. The east side? Said dispatch. Are you in a bakery? Some areas have spotty radio reception. Some places, just ask Buck, have no reception. I spoke to dispatch even more slowly. No, not east, the opposite of west. I swept my other foot across the boards, looking for a toehold. I think I skipped a page. Sorry, guys. There we go. We're back to east. I spelled it out, hoping they would get it. E is in egg sandwich. A is in apple pie. S is in spinach. T is in tangerine. E-A-S-T. I know, it's not proper radio code talk. But I was really hungry, and food was all I could think of. And I like breakfast a lot. Dispatch replied, "You're a beast?" "You didn't say you was in a zoo. Which beast?" "The beast I'm gonna sick on you if you don't get me some help, and soon," I shouted. "You're sick? I thought you said you were stuck." Oh, for the love of a tailwind. Radios can really help, or, like now, make you want to take a new job washing elephants' feet and trimming their toenails. I slipped down another half-inch on the weathered board and felt my winged webbing stretch. If something didn't change mighty fast, my flying days would be over for a long spell and the mission doomed. I didn't want to think about that. It has happened a few times, and we're all sad when the tooth exchange fails. I was determined to keep working at it. I slid my foot across the plank I was hanging on and found a knothole with my big toe. I lifted myself up a bit. The rough-out leather on my moccasin held on the splintery barnwood. I wriggled up a teeny bit more. Meanwhile, back at Radioland, "Myra, do you copy?" "Yeah, but I'm kind of busy right now." What did they think I was doing? Wearing lace, eating scones, and drinking tea? Oh, that did sound good right now. I wonder if Ava's radio static interrupted my hopes for tea with Ava. "You're dizzy? Don't fly then." Of course, we have the strictest rules about flying impaired, but I said busy. Ugh. There was no way I could concentrate on getting loose and talk with all this static. I exhaled a little fairy snort. "Cancel my request for assistance." "Request canceled. Have a nice flight. Dispatch out." Can you believe it? That transmission cleared. If I could just lift up a smidgen, I thought I could unskewer my wing from this plank. I swept my other foot across the boards, looking for another toehold. Suddenly, my foot stopped. I tugged to free it. Instead of coming loose, my moccasin wriggled like a fish on a line. It was moving, but I was not shaking it. This is not good. Ever so slightly, I leaned away from the board to get a view of my foot. Uh-oh. Attached to my dangling leather moccasin was a cat's paw. I stretched a frog's eyelash forward, and I saw the rest of the menace. Matted gray and white stripes pointed like warning arrows to a pair of yellow cat's eyes. 1.5 ears set crookedly above the yellow orbs. Yes, you read me right, 1.5. That left ear was ragged and no longer pointy at the top. Let me tell you, that half ear, it's never a good sign. Now, it's probably no surprise to you that tooth fairies are not at all fond of most cats. They look at us either as toys and bat us around or as food, usually both, and I am not in favor of either. The only thing that saved me for the moment was old Yellow Orbs had just caught the dangling lace, not my entire moccasin. The danger is, hung on a board or not, cats outweigh us by a lot. But that doesn't mean we can't hold our own. You see, there was once a situation with 4 fairies and 1 cat. Hold it, that's a story for another day. Anyway, if Yellow Orbs pulled down on that lace, let's just say things would have gone from, oh rats, I'm stuck, to oh no, I'm a cat snack. I held perfectly still, hoping the cat didn't look up. Yellow Orbs kept chewing and tugging on the lace. Soon the chickens paraded in. You see, it's almost a universal fact. Where there's cows, there's usually chickens. Just what I needed, the poultry posse. Not good times about 6. Chickens don't even take time to play with you. Most of them just eat first and don't even ask questions later. It never occurs to them to even wonder, why did that tickle and squeal as it went down my throat? At least the posse was a distraction. As they circled, pecking at my leather lace, Yellow Orbs first batted one, then the other. Time was short, I could feel it. A quick glance out of the stall door showed the moon sinking lower. Soon, yellow sunlight would tip the junipers, and Leland would be looking under his pillow for a fairy offering. And then, if things weren't exciting enough, suddenly wings were flapping, chickens squawking, and the cat commenced yowling. I don't think the posse liked the cat any more than I did. Phew, there was so much dust I couldn't see what was going on below. My leg was getting knocked around. It got serious in a hurry. I really needed help now. Will Myra complete her mission, or will she be a cat snack?
Well, that's the first half of our program. We're going to take a snack break, which is always a favorite with our juniors crowds.
And Myra.
And Myra. Thank you, Myra. Yes. And then when the music starts again, we'll pass out some coloring pages for the kids and finish with the stories. So give us a few minutes. There's coffee and tea on the table, and we'll set up snacks over here.
When the music starts again? Okay. So I get a short break.
If you'd like.
Okay.
Or you can play.
Okay, I'll put in the date.
So we think that's probably 10 minutes. Our official timekeeper
Or
is
even like,
talking. Have we done 10 minutes?
you
I
didn't.
don't know. We're having fun. Time flies when we're having fun. So Tom played music at the end of the break. And we have color pages laid out. If anybody'd like to take some coloring pages to share with grandkids or kids or neighbors,
Or you want to color in private.
or if you want to color in private, you're welcome to do that. Yeah, there's also crayons, compliments of the Harney County Library. Thank you very much.
Yes, please leave the crayons here.
Yeah, the crayons stay here, but the color pages go home with you. So the next read is Tooth Fairy Ava. And again, Lorna Cagle is the author. She's been a part of our Harney Basin Writers for years and years and years. But she moved to Washougal, Washington. So now by the magic of Zoom, we get to hang out with Lorna. And she chose Lisa to read for Ava.
we threatened to put her in the transmortifier. And, move her here, but she declined.
Something about pieces of her all over the,
Yeah.
there were drag marks everywhere.
Yeah. Tooth Fairy Ava. Pluck by Lorna Cagle. Ava grabbed the sides of the shuttle's doorway and stuck her head out the opening. Below was a corrugated metal roof of an abandoned gas station, the drop-off point. Beyond this, you could see tall buildings and an occasional tree as far out as the horizon would let her eyes travel. She sniffed. An awful smell assaulted her delicate nostrils. This must be what a combination of car exhaust, fumes from nearby factories, and human sweat smells like, she thought. Wrinkling her nose and holding her breath, she clattered down the steps of the spaceship and scurried across the tin roof. The sound of her blue patent leather Mary Janes muffled as she stepped on rusty patches. She rushed to the edge and looked over. No one will be able to spot me with my blue hair and matching gauzy dress. If anyone should look up, I'll blend in with this blue sky. I wish I had paid more attention in flight school, she said aloud. I would love to hover into those low bushes, but I'd better get a move on and figure out how I am going to get down from here. She turned in time to see the shuttle disappear into the bright morning sunlight, then walked cautiously to an opening in one corner of the metal that had caught her eye. She peered down and saw it was a rain spout. It ended at the ground in a puddle of mud and decomposing leaves. Well, if I must, I must, she muttered. At least the landing will be soft, even if undignified. With her arms above her head, she jumped. With a swish and a thump, she was on the ground, coughing and sputtering. What she had thought was mud was actually muddy water, and some of it had splashed up her nose. She heaved herself up, pulled a lace-edged hanky from a side pocket, and wiped her face and nose, then brushed the soggy leaves and muddy drips from her tiered skirt. She stamped her feet to get her shoes off, rid of the larger clumps of mud. At least my hairdo wasn't ruined, she said, patting her curls. She placed her hands on her hips and gazed around. The slight buzz and tingle of her antennas told her she wasn't far from where she was supposed to be. There, across the street, that's a school. Inside there will be lots of boys and girls, so that's where I will head. She dove into a flowering bush beneath a large, partly open window. Climbing up the leafy branches, she reached the windowsill and peeked into the classroom. Yes, this is it. I'm pinging like crazy. Her antennas were at attention and emanating powerful jets of energy. Who in this classroom needs a tooth fairy right now? A group of students gathered by a half-moon table where the teacher was seated in the center of the crescent. Did you know I have a loose tooth? A young girl asked no one in particular. It was a common utterance in this classroom, and no one paid her any heed. Look how loose it is. I can swirl it around with my tongue. She opened her mouth wide to demonstrate her skill. The teacher looked up and said, "Oh, you too, huh?" Staring straight at the girl, she said, "Tina, just be a woman and pull it out." Then she turned her attention to the open notebook in front of her. Along with all the other students, Ava whipped her head around to see what Tina would do. In that moment of scrutiny, Tina clamped her mouth shut. A curious expression transformed her face. She opened her mouth and a blood-rooted tooth spilled from her tongue into her cupped palm. So close! Ava held her hands to her ears to hold her head still. It ached and rocked with the vibrations of her antennas. Mesmerized, she watched Tina and the teacher walk over to the classroom sink and wrap the tooth in a tissue. Tina then placed the package reverently in the side pocket of her backpack. "What do I do now?" asked Ava. I've only practiced retrieving teeth at night from under pillows. I guess I'll have to come up with my own strategy to get this one to the warehouse. A short time later, a bell rang. The students hoisted backpacks onto their shoulders, yelling goodbye to the teachers. They ran, raced, and shoved each other on their way out the door. I've got to catch up with Tina. Ava flew alongside the building to a spot near the main entrance. Wow, maybe I am catching on to this flying business, she thought. Bending at her knees, she prepared for a quick jump. When Tina appeared in the doorway, chatting with a friend, Ava leaped onto her backpack. She slid down to the zipper pole where multiple trendy plastic charms mixed with small cuddly creatures hung in a colorful array. Ava shouldered in between a jeweled elephant and a fuzzy blue rabbit. She hoped no one would notice her. She scooted in deeper and held on, peeking out again to make sure her rash dash had not caught anyone's attention. Tina climbed aboard the bus, found a seat, and tossed her backpack onto the floor next to her feet. It was a bumpy ride for Ava, and she kept a keen eye on Tina's feet. Every time she turned around to talk to her friend, her foot came very close to knocking Ava, right off her zipper pole refuge. At last, the bus slowed down. Tina grabbed her backpack off the floor and swung it around to her shoulder. Ava clung to the metal surface of the zipper pole. Now is not the time to go flying onto someone's lap. That would really surprise everyone. When the bus came to a complete stop, Tina bounced down the steps, ran across the yard and up her own steps, and through the kitchen door. "I'm home," she yelled. "And guess what? My tooth fell out." "Oh my," said her mother. "You'll be rich in the morning after the tooth fairy comes." "I'm going right now to put it in the glass by my bed." She skipped down the hallway to her bedroom. Ava made the perilous leap from the backpack to Tina's collar under her ponytail. She grabbed the elastic hair tie and held on as Tina swung her head from side to side in time to some unheard music. Ava and the ponytail swished across her shoulders as she headed down the hall. Tina pulled a cut from Fostoria glass to the edge of her nightstand and gently laid the tissue-wrapped tooth in it. Then she crumpled a tissue from a nearby box and laid it on top. Tina looked over her shoulder toward her open door. Ava looked too and saw a young boy staring at her. Could that be Tina's little brother? She took this moment to leap into a blue framed picture on the wall above the night table. "What are you looking at, Ethan?" "Faye," he said, pointing to the blue smudge on the picture frame. "Faye!" "Oh no, he's seen me. I never should have tried to fly up here. I should have stayed under Tina's hair. Maybe if I flatten myself more, I'll blend in better." "That's a new word. I don't even know what it means." "Come on, let's go see what Mom has for a snack." Tina grabbed Ethan's hand and began to haul him toward the kitchen. Ava knew that Ethan was not ready to be led away, so she slipped behind the fancy blue frame, but there wasn't enough room. In no time, she heard his feet thunder back towards the bedroom and his high voice calling, "Mama, come see Faye." Ava, half hidden and clinging to her safe haven, winced at the attention. "Faye," Ethan said, pointing to Ava. "See, Mama, see here," he crowed. Ava held her breath, hoping the toddler would lose interest if she didn't move. "Ethan," called his mother from the kitchen, "come get a chocolate chip cookie." Ethan took one more look at Ava. "Bye-bye, Faye." He waved and scampered down the hall. "Ooh," whistled Ava. "These close encounters are hard on my heart." She fanned her face and used her wings to extricate herself from her hiding place. A sound from Tina's bed made the hairs on her arms turn icy. Sliding her eyes, she saw a large white cat with black spots crouched by the pillows, ears flat and tail swishing, evidence of an imminent pounce. The deep growl issuing from the cat and Ava's exclamation, "Oh no!" intersected in midair. Will she fly? Can she fly?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Troubadour. Our last selection, Duncan and Maisie by M.J. Wallace, myself. Ah, what? Duncan, tummy full of warm scones and tea, started from his daydream and jumped to his feet. An alarm beeped from the console. A flashing blip appeared on the screen. A staticky voice tumbled from the console speaker. Central! Hey, Central, this is... Who are we? Oh, yeah, gotcha. This is Shuttle C-21. Anybody there? Duncan flung himself back into the chair and hit a button to open the communications channel. This is Central. Over. This is Buck, the tiny voice shouted. Our pilot's out of commission, and nobody else knows how to fly this bucket. You savvy? Copy that. C-21, my monitor shows you 5 clicks out. Can you confirm? I've got no idea, came the panicked voice from the speaker. Oh, and the cargo door won't open. We're trapped, and we're gonna crash. Copy, we'll be ready for you. Duncan muted his mic. Hey, Maisie. He kicked her basket as he pounded out a code on the keyboard. A bright amber light sprang to life in the cargo bay, blinking a warning signal. Maisie's head nudged his shoulder. The rat laid her hand, palm up on the desktop. Duncan signed in her palm, "Crisis landing, get commander." The rat chirped and then scurried out the door and across the concrete floor of the bay. Duncan activated his mic again. "Collins, Shuttle C-21, over." Another voice, calmer, replied from the speaker. "Yes, dispatch, we hear you." "Parson, is that you?" Recognition rattled Duncan. "What's going on?" Static and a loud whistling screech issued from the comlink, and then Parsons' voice panted, "I'm afraid we have picked up a bad bug on our last rendezvous. He's bitten the pilot and the co-pilot. They're unconscious, I hope. Myra's got the wretched insect down in a chokehold, but it is fighting mad, and it has nasty pincers." Duncan cringed as he heard Parsons' voice shout, "Buck, do not kick it. It's a stink bug. It will..." Oh, pew. It spewed green slime right across the board. Myra, go easy. "No, Buck, no." Blast. More static, and then, "I say, Duncan, are you still there? What's next?" "Activate to autopilot, Parson." Duncan scrolled through the schematic display. "'Tis a small lever in the middle of the console." "No can do, I'm afraid," said Parson in resigned calm. "Buck has smashed the bug, and it's slimed everything with some sort of foul goo. Ava's digging the thing's thorax out of the controls with a long metal nail file." "Eesh!" Ava's voice groaned. "Disgusting." "Ah! Oh, for crying out loud," Parson cried. "Bug juice just exploded across the windscreen. We can't see out." "Right then, you'll have to fly instruments only. I'll talk you through." Duncan switched screens and settled deeper into the chair, typing furiously. A shimmering grid sprang up across Duncan's monitor. A red triangle blinked the shuttle's position. "Whoa, 21, you're coming in way too fast." The reply was static, and faint voices barely audible. Duncan reached under the desk and turned to square Box's black tuner dial. "Come on, I know you're out there," he muttered. Dispatch, do you read? Parsons' voice came from the console. Oh, this is dispatch. I have you booted up for instruments only approach. Brilliant, Parson responded. We are so ready. Do tell. So you see the orange grip in the steering column? Everything, and I do mean everything, is encased in a sheen of green. Parsons sounded muffled as he said, can we find a squeegee or something? Here, Buck's voice blurted in the background. Ava has a rag. Show some respect, cried Ava's voice. That's the hem off my silk skirt. Thank you, Ava, came Parsons' cheery voice. Righto, orange grip uncovered. What now? So depress it slowly against the steering column, said Duncan, and brace yourself. It's going to send your thrusters into sudden reverse. Duncan heard the soft patter of Maisie's return, reached a hand down to meet her. He felt her slender fingers in his palm, signing her message. Commander gone. Ladybug crew too, she signed. Great, Duncan signed. We're on our own? Ship landing too fast. Deploy hazard slugs? Maisie's little fingers asked. Go do? Duncan laughed out loud. Oh, great idea. Go do it, he signed. What is funny? Parsons' strained voice sound from the comm. We got a surprise landing for you, said Duncan back in the mic. How's it going? A mechanical groan sounded in the background of Parsons' reply. I'm not sure the shuttle will hold together. We're slowing in short bursts of gravity. It's not being kind to us. I'm gonna hurl, Buck's voice moaned. Buck, turn away from, Myra's voice cried. Ew, Ava wailed. Hang on, said Duncan. Parson, turn to starboard 10 degrees. I am a tooth fairy, not a pilot, Duncan. Which way is that? Parsons' voice shouted. Right, turn right just a bit, Duncan answered. There's a nav gauge just last of center on your console. You see it? Ava, Buck's voice called. We need a clean rag. A ripping sound and another outraged cry from Ava. This is Dior silk, you know. Classy, thanks, shouted Buck's voice. There, now can you see it? Got it. Parsons' voice was calmer. 10 degrees, to the right, aye. The red triangle on Duncan's screen lined up with the green grid marked success, but it quickly veered off into a gray field on the edge of the screen. Back to the left 10 degrees, Parsons, slow and steady. Okay, came Parsons' wary reply. Not an exact science, then? We are flying blind here. Duncan glanced out to see Maisie, chittering encouragement as she tossed handfuls of orange slugs across the cement surface. The well-trained rescue slugs tucked and rolled onto the concrete. Soon the bay's landing strip was afizzle with the little gastropods busily gushing piles of frothy lather. Outside the bay's door, Duncan spotted the wobbling, smoking fleck that was the black shuttle, heading straight for Tooth Fairy Central. Question: will Maisie's slug slime team save the day?
Well, that concludes the readings. We appreciate your attention. We're going to have a brief discussion of our writing process and open it up for questions, followed by book sales and signings. So, I think you can all hear us okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh. This is our mascot. Our motto is Semper Gumby, which means always flexible.
Oh, that's a good one.
We were going to discuss 3 Ps today, and fill in the blanks and ask questions throughout this discussion if you want. You don't have to wait till the end. So the 3 Ps are our purpose and our process, and then the last one, which surprised us in a way, is persistence. So our purpose was to have fun. we're all writers, and it was becoming clear that we were straining really hard, and we wanted to do something that was fun. You want to add to that?
Yeah, the word fun had become kind of foreign. We were so focused on editing the projects that we were on and crafting them to make them better, because anybody can write, and I encourage everyone I meet to write, but when you take what you've written and refine it, that's authoring, and very few people take the time to author. Well, we had taken a lot of time to author, and I believe it was Lorna that said, you know, what we need is just to have fun. Let's do something fun.
We were so busy sculpting our words that we kind of lost sight of why we were there, why we were writing, why we were taking all this effort to make it just perfect. I mean, there would be discussions that went on for minutes and minutes, and maybe some more minutes, about which word was perfect for that place.
We're all word nerds.
Well, I don't really subscribe to that, but.
We're all
So, when Lorna said fun, we kind of all went, really? What's that? But then she was persistent, really persistent, so we decided to give it a go.
Yep, and we decided we could do a joint project, and I don't have a memory of how tooth fairies were hatched. Peg thought maybe it was because of something you'd encountered recently then, which was what, 2 years ago?
2 years ago, yeah. I was curious about tooth fairies. Where did it come from? Where did this idea of somebody slipping money under your pillow for a tooth, and come to find out that that's one of several things that people do for teeth, for when the kids' teeth fall out. And we talked about, well, why would we do tooth fairies? Well, we want to encourage kids, because losing a tooth, that's kind of scary. And if we do some fun stories about tooth fairies, that might encourage.
We wanted very much to make this a story that people could read aloud to their kids, that it's family-based. Matter of fact, Bad Bug got redrawn about 5, maybe 6, maybe 8 different times to make it not scary, but scary enough for a family document. So we worked really hard on that to make sure it would flow, and kids could read it, older kids could read it by themselves, adults would enjoy it, and the whole family could read it together.
Right, part of it was, as a parent, I always enjoyed a read-aloud book that had a little adult humor kind of woven in that the kids might not get, but that you really enjoyed. So that was part of the goal, was to make it entertaining for the reader, but also at a reading level that accounted for a lot of age range. The other thing is, as we all know, living out here presents certain challenges. And so the ball started getting kicked around about, well, what if they had to do a tooth in French Clan? You might have recognized some of Lisa's buildings there. Or what if they're in the barn and the cow swings her tail, or if something happens. So then it kind of, you know how that can go squirrel on you. And we had a lot of fun with, well, what would it take to be a tooth fairy in Harney County? And then we have people such as Lorna, who had a whole different take on her tooth fairy, like Ava is a fashionista. You know, and Myra falls out of trees, and Buck's a wannabe cowboy. So we had fun with those possibilities that the area presented. It's really target rich for trials here, as we all know.
There was an occasion when driving back from the wool show in Prineville with a car full of wool people, that I posed the question of what life for a tooth fairy would be like in Harney County, which kept the occupants of that vehicle occupied for at least an hour, and we have many, many, many opportunities to elaborate in our next books. You notice this is Tooth Fairy Volume 1.
Right. Well, we'll move on to process. we each had our own process, and we wrote independently. There wasn't really any collaborative writing. And we can each speak to our process. And we started out meeting together, and then of course the pandemic hit, and then we did Zoom. And we've only had one or maybe 3 meetings together since then, mainly because Lorna has since moved to Washougal. And so we Zoom up and do that. In terms of writing process, what we did do to come together was to critique, and much like what we were doing before with our individual writing, where we'd get together and say, well, we'd read and then we'd critique each other's writing. So that was the joint process, although Peg on her own has taken and woven the stories together with Duncan and Dispatch. And that's pretty masterful, because the amazing thing was that was not planned either. It happened. They were going to be kind of read aloud individual standalones, and they are standalones, but with Peg's clever weaving in there, she has linked them together for the Tooth Fairy Storybook in a really clever way, which you heard some of with the impending crash landing on slug slime of the transport. So, yeah.
What really is, go ahead.
Well, go ahead, because I'm just.
What astonished us when we had this relatively completed, and we had wordsmithed each other's work fully, almost. I found some things that
There's
could be-
more.
What astonished us was that we had all been operating on a similar theme, which turned out to be perseverance. And each one of those tooth fairies was demonstrating that in some way. And that also helped tie the stories together.
Mhm.
We never imagined the kind of finished product that we would produce. Matter of fact, that sometimes we weren't sure we were producing anything.
There was a lot of that, yeah. And we got to talking about the word perseverance. And it's a big word, and it's not heard much anymore. So that, well, how can we get that across to everyone? And so each of the tooth fairies chose a theme, a synonym. So doggedness is ideal for Buck. You'll find out later in the story.
There's more.
Oh,
There's a
so
ranch
much.
dog involved. It's pretty amazing.
It's cool. Yeah, and stick-to-itiveness is pretty obvious for Myra. You know, it was fun being word nerds just to pick a synonym. Okay, here we go. Let's try this one on. Let's try that one. I wanted to say too that in Scotland, the tooth fairy is actually a white rat. So I don't know where Duncan showed up. He was in the dispatch center, and then there was Maisie, and Maisie was blind. And you'll find out how that happened as you read the book. Or, you know, you can quiz us later if you'd rather. But the thing that surprised me most during the process was the development of each of the characters. And they had such distinct personalities. And now there's so much a part of us. It's like, well, Duncan wouldn't say that. You know, as we're in our meetings, it's like, okay, so what would Ava do? They've become real to us.
There you go.
You have any questions? Yes, sir.
Being near the project at times, I can't wait until you guys come up with the idea of, if there's tooth fairies for people, there must be tooth fairies for baby elephants and people like that. And I'm trying to really imagine
Wow.
what would you call it, the amount of, what am I trying to think of? What you'd have to do to if you're, 3 inches to 6 inches tall to transport a baby elephant's tusk.
Cross-species.
I don't know.
Cross-species issues.
Yeah, I just think that would be a neat way to go with baby
Books
critters.
free.
You know, we have about a 2-hour meeting every week. And sometimes the majority of those meetings are spent world building in Tooth Fairyland. For instance, there's the Thopter, which you haven't met yet and you won't for a while. But all the details of how the Thopter was invented and how it functions and even the drawings of the thopter and where the hatch is, and
Is there a kitchenette?
is there a kitchenette? I mean, it took up a whole meeting.
I missed that.
Sorry.
Oh, no, that was Bailey. Yeah. Lorna's
Oh.
granddaughter zooms in with us. She's 8, 9? Yeah, and that was her question. Where's the kitchenette?
Oh my word, that's
So we're
hilarious.
appealing to a broad base here.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
very interesting.
Which takes some of the pressure off of our other writing, and actually, what we found through all this, and it's, as you've heard, it's a group dynamic and a group effort, which means we learn a lot from each other. We found that our writing actually had improved considerably through the process. When I picked up Tooth Fairy Storybook after not having seen it for quite a while and read the stories, I went, you know, that's not bad. I was quite surprised. So,
From someone who said, I don't write fiction.
yeah, I don't write fiction. How am I going to do this? They really insisted that I was going to write fiction, and I said, I can't do that. We did it.
Which,
Apparently you can.
Mark,
Explain the more in depth the difference between writing and authoring. What-
Writing is really getting it from here, which is where most writing takes place, between your ears, and getting it down on paper. Journaling is writing. First draft is writing.
letters.
Writing that terrible letter that you're never going to send, hopefully, is writing.
Or that lovely letter.
Or the beautiful crafted letter of, thank you so much. That's writing. And for the author, the first draft is the most important one, because if you don't get it out of here, it stagnates, it evaporates. So writing is really important for everyone. I encourage everyone I meet. Well, do you write? Have you written it down? There's so many awesome stories out there. And then the fact of authoring is where you take your rough draft, you know, if you're going to look at improving it a bit. Well, if you'd like to see, this is authoring. This is where I've taken Duncan's voice and actually written it, because when it first came out of here onto the paper, there wasn't a lot of dialect. But the more we got to know Duncan, the more we realized this is a hardcore Scot. I mean, you can tell a Scot, but you can't tell a much. That's Duncan.
Thanks very much.
And that was the end of their marriage. And you were there.
Yeah, so the fact of authoring actually improves. And I asked a writer in residence once, how many drafts do you need? And he said, as many as it takes. So there's the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. I actually have what I call the 6th draft of a novel that I'm working on. So you just keep going until it's time to publish.
We did things like, to author, consider story arc, character development, defining what the course of the character's needs are and how they're met and how that influences the way the story evolves. I thought writing was, the only reason I got into the writers group was because Marjorie Phelan said, oh, you should come to our writers group. And I said, well, thank you very much, but
I'm not a writer.
I'm not a writer. I managed to carry that on for years, but, and I was really astonished as we went through the process to learn. I've had more experience actually doing artwork, and I liken the authoring part to sculpting. You've seen probably stones that Michelangelo started to sculpt and never finished, but he would go around and say, I know there's an angel in this rock, and start to cut it out. Well, that's the authoring part. Knowing that the angel's in the rock and choosing the rock, that's the writing part. But actually cutting it out and forming it into the most beautiful sculpture you've ever seen, that's the authoring part.
How are we going to get this in the hands of all the
teachers in Harney County.
Oh, that's really sweet, thanks.
I mean, but this, I feel like this story is gonna, especially for the ones, well, not that the older kids couldn't relate, but I don't even know, do they read aloud in school anymore?
I don't
Do
know.
we have story time? I just don't know this, because it's so pertinent, and that's what I'm hearing when I wanna give this to this teacher and to that teacher, and, you know, I think they read, I hope they read.
I do hope they read. The wonderful thing about read-alouds, and I picked this up early in my school career. I had teachers that read to me, and they imparted to me the love of the written word,
Oh, yes.
and also expanding vocabulary, because you don't always know what persistence means, but you can fix persistence to stick-to-itiveness, for example. Yeah, and the other thing about family read-alouds that we're really encouraging is when families read aloud, you have common friends. Pooh Bear and Tigger. And then you can say, well, hello, Tigger, how are you this morning? And you're jumping around on the floor, 5-year-old knows, oh, you're talking about that story that we read about Tigger. And yeah, it's vital, and I'm hoping that our project will stimulate more read aloud in family time and in school time. It's that important. So yeah, we may just make a list of teachers that you think that would be interested, and I'll be happy to donate a book.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Yep. That's all we got to say.
Except,
Thank you very much.
except,
She has an accept.
we thank you all for coming, and
Indeed.
where Beryl is, we thank the library. We have some,
We have stuff.
we have a couple of thank you notes that I'd appreciate everybody coloring or writing on, whatever your preference is. Both for the Burns Dental Group, and I'll get to that in a minute, as well as the library. And as you may have guessed, when you have snacks and you have tooth fairies, it would not be good to not offer toothbrushes. So please take
Only
as
private
many,
ones you want to keep.
take as many as you want. The Burns Dental Group does not want them back. We are not going to be selling them on the street corner after our get-together. So please take plenty to share and give. And we thank you all for coming. There's more snacks.
Oh yeah, and Tom's gonna man the sales booth for us. If you'd like to buy a copy, we'd be
I
happy
just
to
have to
autograph
get the
it.
guitar.
Oh yeah, there's that part too.
I just need to put my guitar away.
Oh, definitely, put your guitar over.
Telling me about this.
See you back at the shop later.
Yeah, 2 o'clock, is that what you
Yeah,
said?
my 3 o'clock.
Well, yeah.